Good morning. My mind is a mess. I know that this word mess carries some negative connotations. It's like when I say my mind is a mess, you may think, oh, I'm worried for you. But let me see if I can make some different sense of this word mess. I really feel today that I don't know how to say what I want to say. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe we're always in that situation that we know that we want to do or say something, but we don't quite know what it means to do that, to carry that out, to carry that forward. This is like in every moment we're at the edge of something that we feel should be happening, that we want to do, that needs to be done. And yet it's so unclear what it is. But it's difficult to admit that, or to become somewhat comfortable with that mess. I'm just saying mess, but I don't want mess to say what it usually says. I want it to say something different, new. And maybe there's a different word that could say it better, but I could only find that out in the process. Now there's a phrase in Zen mind, beginner's mind, that when you look at it as poetry, it's sort of like pleasant. You're like, wow, this is kind of cool. When you look at it more closely, it's very disturbing because it's like it's just confusing, or you don't know what it means. So here's the phrase: when Suzuki Roshi says, "When you become you, Zen becomes Zen." Oh. And then he says, when you become you, you see things as they are, and you become one with your surroundings. Okay, again, when you become you, Zen becomes Zen. And when you become you, you see things as they are, and you become one with your surroundings. I'll just take the first part of this phrase, when you become you. I mean, what is that supposed to mean? It's just crazy. Okay, when you have the word you, it seems to denote some kind of unit, some kind of object, some kind of entity, some kind of person, some kind of subjectivity, right, that is given. So if it's given, if you say, I don't know what you might say. This car, you're referring to this unit, this entity, this vehicle, this object in space, this possession of yours or whatever, so you're pointing to something. So if you say you, it seems like you are pointing to something. But then to say when you become you means that there's a you that isn't you yet, but can become you. So there's another unit, and some other thing, some other entity that isn't quite aligned with the you that already exists. You follow what I'm saying? It's very strange, because it means there is a you that you need to become to be fully you, but you are you, a you that is not fully that you, so you are kind of not really authentic you that needs to become a more fully authentic you? Anyway, that seems to be the goal of Zen practice, according to Suzuki Roshi, because when you become you in this way that is inconceivable to me, then Zen becomes Zen. So this you becoming you is a kind of, clearly some kind of, in our established Western terms, it's some kind of subjectivity. But when this subjectivity becomes fully itself, then you see how things actually are. What? I mean, we have an institution that tells us how things actually are. That's science. So when this subjectivity becomes fully itself, then it does, it knows the world exactly as it is, like it, becomes all scientific or what? I mean, clearly that's not what he means, but, I'm just trying to point out a problem. What does the phrase, things as they actually are, point to? I mean, it seems to, again, in our Western terms, seem to point to some kind of objectivity, how things out there actually are. And there too, how they actually are, because there seems to be some kind of delusion about how things actually are. So this waking up of the you to itself is also a waking up to how things actually are and getting outside of delusion. And then on top of that, you become one with your surroundings. So some difference between subjectivity and objectivity falls away. What a program. So if I feel out, how's that the same thing, feeling into and feeling out? When I feel into what's in there, there's some, topics of exploration that are of interest to me. I'm interested in what authenticity might be. It's like, I don't really feel like I can say what authenticity is, but I can recognize in people, and sometimes people will say to me that what really brings them to practice, or why they want to practice, is because they want to live an authentic life. So there's some need or some desire, some wish, or, strong purpose in people to want to live an authentic life. Yeah, I think we need to really respect that. In other words, people want to become themselves. They want to become, I want to become I. You want to become you. As Suzuki Roshi is saying, when you become you. There's some other thing that interests me, which is it's hard to talk about, is the relationship between language and the so-called ineffable. That which cannot be said, that which is more than language, that which is maybe even divine, and it doesn't lend itself to just being spoken about, or, the Tao that can be spoken about is not the Tao, that kind of thing. or in Zen, if you speak, you get 30 blows. Or if you don't speak, you get 30 blows too. It's like, ah! So this relationship between language and the ineffable is interesting to me. There's something else that interests me, which is alienation, how we feel separate from our surroundings. And Suzuki Roshi seems to say there's a cure for that. You don't have to feel alienated. You don't have to feel stuck in your head or imprisoned in your body or imprisoned in identity suggestions that society makes and so forth. There's a promise for freedom here that it's hard to know what exactly is meant by that, and becoming one with my surroundings. What is that? And then there's an interest that I have, which is sort of, maybe wasn't Suzuki Roshi's problem. And I don't even know how to speak about it. It's the impasse that our society is in. Maybe we have to call it the impasse of postmodernity or something. Well, that sounds kind of philosophical, but let me see if I can explain it. Postmodernity, François Lyotard, the French philosopher, suggested that, the postmodern condition is that no meta-narrative, no grand narrative works anymore. In other words, somebody can present to you a grand narrative, Marxism or something, and you get into it, you study Marxism, and then it just, at the edges, it all kind of starts to fall apart. It's not really believable. There's just too many problems with this narrative of Marxism. It's funny to say in America, Marxism. Anyway, I grew up in Germany. Marxism it's okay to talk about. Okay, but there are other grand narratives like, Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism for that matter. And they all, if you look, the closer you look, they all kind of start to crumble. It's like you can't really invest yourself anymore in the postmodern condition in become a true believer of something because it doesn't hold up conceptually in the end. I don't know if you've ever thought about that or if you feel that's true, but anyway, some people have talked about this, and it is, I think it describes quite well the skepticism that we have now, sort of like either explicitly or we just feel it as a kind of nuisance or disturbance or worry about the future, that it is hard to imagine how any society now can actually develop some kind of shared understanding or consensus to move forward from. So in that sense, I think it's a useful description of the situation we're in. Now, I'm going out on a limb here, and these are a lot of topics, so I don't know where I can go in 45 minutes or something, but you may remember when Donald J. Trump was elected president, and there was the first press conference. Sean Spicer, you guys remember him? Sean Spicer said that the inaugural crowd was the biggest in history. Some people just ridiculed that, and some people were shocked. that this is how the press secretary was introducing himself to the nation, basically, with a blatant lie. Right? It was a real event. And then to top that, a spokesperson for the Trump administration, Kellyanne Conway, sat in a talk show, I forget where, CNN, MSNBC, it doesn't matter really, right? She was confronted with this lie of the press secretary, and she defended it, and she said that he was simply presenting alternative facts. And there was an outcry, right? How could she do that? What is this outcry? What is this outcry about? Either we have facts, in other words, either we have statements that are true, or, it's fiction, but you don't have alternative facts. But there's an understanding implied in this outrage that words have a meaning that already exists, and the words just convey that meaning. I think this is a very antiquated understanding of language. Words mean what they do in a situation. Now, we could debate that or something. I don't know. If you're philosophically inclined, it would be a complicated argument to have. But I'll just go along with it for a moment and say, like, words mean what they do in a situation. So what I understand when Kellyanne Conway speaks about alternative facts is that she uses the power of the word fact. Because each word means what it does in this particular situation, but it brings with it all the meanings that it used to have. So the word fact implies something like truth and, indisputability and so forth. So Kellyanne Conway brings all these meanings, but employs them in a new way in that situation and before a large audience, and says, there can be different truths, there can be alternative facts. But I wonder what Trump's Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway, what they meant when they were doing what they did by saying that the crowd was, was unprecedentedly big. Maybe what they were doing is they were just saying that what was happening was momentous and very important. And that this movement that they were representing was taking itself seriously. And that something big was happening in America. And if we're looking at it from that point of view, they are right about it. You don't really believe that Kellyanne Conway doesn't know how the word fact is usually used, right? You don't really believe that Sean Spicer really believes that the photograph doesn't show that the crowd isn't smaller than other crowds, or that Trump didn't see that either. I mean, there's clearly a communication that deliberately ignores that and tries to convey a different kind of truth to people who are eager to hear it, something like that. This is the condition of postmodernity, because you can now say all kinds of things. And make them have an impact. And this is, I think this is scary because it happens all over the place. It doesn't just happen, from the podium of the press secretary. It happens on Twitter every day. It's like people just say things and it has an impact, and then it means what it does. So the worry, I think, in this situation is that nothing can be believed, everything can be constructed, as you wish. It's like there's no reliable shared ground. And where does the society go from here when we are in that situation? So this is maybe what I'm trying to point to by saying the postmodern impasse. So we can just give up. I don't know. That is the suggestion, just, one way to live with a postmodern condition is to recognize that the situation is serious, but not to take it that seriously. Just laugh it off. Or just do your own thing, and it's just like, geez, what can you do? It's just a mess. So I want to come back and ask again, what is this you that becomes you? Now, if you've studied Buddhism a bit, or you're just generally spiritually inclined, you may have already a kind of distinction in place for yourself between a self written with a small s, and a self written with a capital S. Yeah? Between an ordinary self, or we could say a narrative self, or an egoic self, whatever these terms mean, it's all hard to... Anyway, these words do something, and we can just rely on that. And between a true self. Suzuki Roshi, for example, makes the distinction, by avoiding the word self, he makes the distinction between a small mind and a big mind. It's a similar kind of distinction, but it may be bringing something else that self doesn't bring. So let's just give a couple of examples. When you sit zazen and you feel discomfort in your body, in your knee, in your hip, in your chest, wherever, somewhere, you feel discomfort or pain, you may find that there is something that doesn't want to have that pain, that tries to adjust your posture, or that tries to launch some kind of inner process to release the pressure that you feel in your chest or the tightness that you feel in your throat, that says, oh, maybe I need to do some emotional processing to get this stuckness in my throat resolved, this grief that is unexpressed, or this anxiety that is weighing on my chest. Something needs to happen here. So there is this you that wants to feel better, or doesn't want to have a certain kind of experience. If you sit sesshin for 7 days, you could spend 7 days with this you trying to fix your experience. Or you could not spend time with that you could be that you that is trying to fix your experience. But this is just an example. Maybe that you that is trying to fix your experience, this you has experiences, as if these experiences are something different from the you. So the you has separated itself from its own experience and is trying to manipulate it. That is the you that wants to have a better car, or that wants to make some improvement, or do something fun, or that wants to take a course and learn a new language. See, it's endless. You see what I'm saying? It's the whole palette of your experience of that this you is trying to manage. And there's something unsatisfactory about this you that is thrashing around, trying to do things and manipulate things and making them better and so forth, because it's an endless process and it never comes to any conclusion. And so this self can also start to doubt itself, and it wants to do something about itself, and it wants to transcend itself into something truer. And then you have this promise of a true self. I listened to a podcast the other day, and people were talking about, this was actually a political podcast, and somebody was making fun of people who go to India to try to find their true self in India. It's what self did you lose in India that you think you have to go there to find it? All right, so there's a true self. Buddhism says there's no self, and that's hard to reconcile with this idea that there could be a true self, because if there's no self, then how can there be a self that could be true, truer, more authentic than this small self that is thrashing around? All right, and then when you investigate deeper into this question, who am I really? Who am I authentically? You have to say no to most things that are being suggested as answers to this question. I'm not the story that I'm telling myself, because there could be other stories. Here it is again, the postmodern condition. Or, I'm not this body. The body is always changing, and it's made out of elements that are, constantly recircling, and I'm aging, and I'm not this body. And I'm also not the discursive mind that runs through my head. And all these answers are kind of dissatisfying. And then you say, but you could arrive at a question which I think is extremely powerful, and I suggest you ask it now and then, maybe constantly. What is aware? What is aware of whatever is happening? Which is, Dogen speaks about taking the backward step. what is aware is taking a backward step. It's like, oh, I'm having this thought, but what is aware of this thought? Oh, I'm having this body exists. What is aware of this body? Oh, there's this story about myself which I'm not satisfied with anymore, or which I'm quite satisfied with, and which I would like to embellish and tell people so that they believe that this is who I am. What is aware of this story and this desire to be seen a certain way? And what do you find when you try to answer the question, what is aware? Well, you find maybe your impulse to answer questions with words, and then you say, well, I am pure awareness. Okay, somebody might say that in a spiritual book and say, you are pure consciousness, or you are pure awareness, or you are the awareness of awareness, or some phrase, And then you say, okay, check, fine, What is aware of pure awareness? So when you finally stop chattering, and you sit down, and you don't try to figure things out anymore, conceptually, you could just get a sense that there is an open space. As I like to say, if you have me heard speak before, it's a field, it's the field of mind. And in this field of mind, or in this open awareness, which has no form, because in it all the contents and all the forms appear, they come and go. Visuals come, sounds come, feelings come, words come, stories come, different attentional foci come and go and get replaced by others. But there seems to be a space, a stable. The German philosopher Thomas Metzinger, some of his works are translated into English, he talks about an epistemic space. That sounds too fancy for me, but it's a space of knowing. I prefer actually the word experience. It's the space of experience, of any experience. So sometimes I call it's the space of experientiality. It's like whatever experience is, it appears in that space of awareness. We each are this space. We each are this space alongside all the contents that appear in it. You may have observed this in yourself or other people who are on a spiritual path. There's one idea that you could transcend this small self, all the contents of experience that you are liking or not liking or opposing or want to manipulate, to transcend that into becoming this awareness space. Because that space has no form or color, even to call it a space is wrong, because what we call space appears within that awareness. You see what I'm saying? Space itself is also a content that appears within awareness. If you are thinking space or feeling into space, where does that thinking or that feeling occur? What is aware of it? So space occurs within awareness. So awareness isn't space. It's literally nothing. But it is aware. So when you have an experience of that, a direct experience of that, it's actually quite powerful just to intimate it, to know that you are this unburdened awareness. It's like you want to transcend the messiness of your life into this pure awareness, this true self. That is, if you spell it out in Hindu or Advaita Vedantic terms, that is not separate from divine consciousness. So my true self is not separate from the universal divine consciousness that, then you're in a theological space. That's quite speculative. But there is something profound in how liberating it is to be this awareness space rather than the self that is thrashing around in the contents of mind. So I'm not denying that. There's something extremely liberating. Now, do you want to extrapolate that into like transcendence and divinity and so forth? Just, if you want to, fine. You just create more content that you thrash around in. Okay, and so what I'm really setting up here is, isn't there something else, actually, that resides somewhere between this small self and this true self, this small mind and this big mind? And I am really, really struggling to find ways to articulate that. Oh, before I go there, I do want to say, those who want to avoid transcendence and all that speculative theological stuff will say that the small self is not different from the true self. That the way the true self expresses itself, the way the field of mind expresses itself, is through all the contents. That's non-duality. You could say if you want to escape into the transcendence of the true self, that's a kind of monism, Everything is one, and all these contents are just, I don't know what they are, actually. It doesn't make any sense to me. They're just distractions. I don't know. Delusions, for sure. But non-duality, it would mean like there's an expression here, as a relationship of expression. Like, form is emptiness. That would be the transcendent move. And then emptiness is form, because emptiness expresses itself as form. So then you have, you're avoiding the dualism between emptiness and form. Okay. Something to think about for the rest of your life. But I really trust that you get what these words are doing right now. You don't have to understand this theoretically. You just go along with what they're doing. They point out something in your experiential field. So, I'm looking for something that is in between here. And I talk about it, I've written about it, and the best word that I have come across is the felt sense. This word I'm taking from Eugene Gendlin's philosophy about language and meaning. He's also found ways to apply it in the realm of psychotherapy, but I'm not thinking in psychotherapeutic terms here. It can be applied there, but it can be applied in all kinds of ways. So we're not talking about psychotherapy. That's the way it is being popularized, though. When you are, not all of us are engaged in this activity of writing, but if you have some experience with writing, you know this moment in which you want to say something that you mean, something that you feel you want to say, and you don't quite know how to say it. And there is a juncture here. At that very point, this is a very interesting point. If you are a true writer, you learn to cherish this point. Because at that very point, you might be able to say something new. Something authentic. But you could refuse to be stuck in trying to say what you mean, what you feel, what is on your mind, and just say things that have already been said. There will be words and phrases and ideas that you have heard, and you can put them into that slot and just go on with your writing. And I think you will feel satisfied in the sense that you've completed your writing, but you will feel dissatisfied because you will feel that you were slightly or tremendously inauthentic in writing down these words that you just heard, but that are not really your own. How can that be? What is going on there? Now, even if you're not a writer or interested in that, you might feel this happening just in talking to people. You want to express something that is really what you mean. It is important to you, but you don't know how to say it. And so you'll just tell the same old story. You just repeat what you've heard somebody else say. And you're not willing to be stuck. But if you're willing to be stuck, you might say something, okay? Give it a try. Like I'm in that situation right now. I'm giving it a try. I'm giving it a good go. And when I'm not satisfied with what I'm saying, I may have to say it again. I may have to employ new words and other distinctions to get at what I'm saying, what I want to say. And this may be an ongoing process until something tells me that I've expressed it sufficiently well. What in you tells you that you've said or done something sufficiently well? This thing that tells you that is what I'm calling the felt sense. It is very much you. That felt sense is very much you. This is where authenticity resides. Now, if we're stuck in a worldview of subject and object, some scientist may come along and say, well, That's just some subjective stuff you're dealing with. And you will cast doubt on your you that you've just discovered and say like, oh, I don't know. Well, I guess so. It's just certain feelings I have. It's like, it's just subjective. It's not how things really are. It's not objective. This may be a long talk. I apologize. But not really. I'm not sorry. But you can leave if it's not interesting to you. In that sense, I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. I feel compelled to say this. And I don't think it's Zen. It's just something that is so obvious to me. It's so liberating. It needs to be somehow said. And it's hard to say. So this felt sense is you, and it's not just subjective, is what I'm trying to say right now. I'm saying we could move beyond the distinction of subjective and objective. How? The whole idea of objective and subjective inside the subject that resides inside in the head, in the body or something, and the objective world that resides outside stems from starting philosophy, spiritual exploration in the wrong place. It's starting all that from the place of perception. It's like, here am I, and I'm perceiving something over there. And as soon as you have that set up, that there are objects out there that I'm perceiving, you have all kinds of problems. You have alienation, the subject is alienated from the object, and you have the problem of truth, because how can what I'm seeing be the same as what you're seeing, because we have different perspectives. Clearly, I see you, and I don't see myself, and you see me, and you don't see yourself. So we have very different perspectives. Like if you put an object out, I see it from one side and you see it from the other side. How can we always, at any time, be sure that our perspectives and views are converging to show the same object? And that's why there's a multiplicity of views and viewpoints and so forth. But there's a different starting point. Two people, you and I, have different perspectives, but we both have only one interaction. This is something Eugene Gendlin said, and when I come back to it again and again, and it's like, it just blows my mind. Two people have one interaction. There are philosophies out there that say the world is not made up of objects, everything is relationship. And for a long time, I thought, oh, yeah, it sounds good, but for two things to be in a relationship, there need to first be two things, or else they can't have a relationship. Right? So then you have the division again. So it's hard with the language that we have is to see the relationship, the interaction, the connectedness as primary, and see that from that primary, there's just one interaction between two people, to let the people emerge from the interaction, from the relationship, from the interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, from the dependent co-origination. To not make the people primary, and then how do they relate, but to let the relatedness be primary and let the things and the people and the objects arise from that as distinctions that we can make. Now, that is all abstract. It doesn't help you in living, really, if you say, oh, well, relatedness is primary. Yes, it shifts your point of view a little bit, and it's not useless, but the big question for me is like, how is that relatedness represented? And this is the wrong word. How is it experientially? And the way it is experientially is as a felt sense. The body implies its environment. The body implies all its interactions. The entire situation that we're in is already implied, and I say represented in quotation marks because it's not like it's separate from, like, here's this thing and then it's represented. The body knows the situation as a felt sense. And what it knows is always more than I can say about it. Is always more than any distinctions I can make. It is the complexity of everything all at once, big mind, that actually lives in and through this living body. This living body is not separate from all its interactions. Right now I can't say it any better. And this interactiveness, this, I call it undivided activity, or this interbeing, or whatever word you want to put there. This is not arbitrary. This is not something you can just make up. You can't tell any old story about this. So, I'm concerned that I'm being misunderstood right now. You and I have a relationship, and we haven't had this relationship very long. You moved in here to Boulder Zen Center a few months ago, so we could say we're getting to know each other. But the way I know you, through my experience, through my interactions with you, is not arbitrary. I can't make up any old story about this. If I make up it, well, actually, I can make up any old story about this, but then I will feel inauthentic. And if I make up any old story and articulate it to you and say, like, that's who you are, you'll say, well, bullshit, not true, and I don't believe you. You're just making this up. So our relationship will be inauthentic. It will be there will be a kind of feeling of disrespect. So if we want to be truthful with our speaking and our doing with relationship to this felt sense, which is the expression of the way we are interrelated with everything, we need to be very careful. It's a difficult job to articulate it in such a way that it actually makes sense to myself and other people. Are you still with me? So the reason this is so important to me is because in the postmodern condition, it seems like anything goes, as it says, as we say, or you can just make up any story, or all the stories are not true, but actually there is authentic expression. There is, when you meet somebody and you invite them to speak from their actual felt sense about any situation, any lived, real situation that they're in, they will need to find words that are true in order to convey them meaning the situations that they're in. And the interesting thing is, because two people have one interaction, as someone is speaking truthfully, I will feel it. I will know it. That somebody is making an insincere attempt to do just that. And sometimes, and those are beautiful moments, I get what you say. How do you know that I get what you say? Not by me professing, oh yeah, I understand you. You will know that I get what you say by how I carry the situation forward. If I carry the situation forward in a way that implies the understanding that you just presented, then you can be sure that I understood you. So the truth of what we do together isn't in some sort of abstract meaning realm, like the meanings that already exist and we just have to pick them up, with our, radio minds that receive the signals of meaning or objective truth. But they are, the truth is in the way we carry situations forward in a meaningful way together. So the outrage about saying that there are alternative facts isn't so much that it's not allowed to use the word fact in a different way. I think that's allowed. Language is open to be used for anyone. It's the dishonesty in relating to each other. It's like not taking in the concern that it seems like something else was happening than you are portraying. And it's actually on both sides. It's the interviewer not really understanding what is trying to be conveyed here by the Trump administration. We could say these people are just foolish. They want to believe lies and so forth. But if you are going to a felt sense, you will notice that they're screaming for expressing something that wants to be expressed in this society. I'm not saying they're doing it in a particular skillful way. But if you listen underneath the words of what is trying to be said, you would start to have actually a compassionate relationship to people who are not given the space to express something, so they have to employ a seemingly ridiculous phrase like alternative facts. So I would say it's not enough to play around with emptiness and form, with when you become this truer you, then you become something divine. Zen becomes Zen, metaphysics ascends to the heavens, you will be, joined with the universe. The way you become one with your surroundings isn't as like some mystical, illumination, maybe that too, but is to recognize that this body and mind does not exist as a separate unit from other units that are being perceived out there, but that there is an undivided activity that is actually fully alive in your body as felt sense. This is how you are not separate from your surroundings. At any point, at any moment, you're not separate in this way. And to know things how they actually are isn't to know them as separate units out there, and you know the truth about an apple, and you know the truth about quantum mechanics, and you know the truth about your friend Lizzie. It's to know that things are not separate, that they are interaction, that they're undivided activity, that we all bring each other's, we all bring forth each other in every moment, and that the way we live our lives is just, is carrying this situation forward into this situation, carrying, as I like to say, the present into the present, because it's like this situation never goes away that you're in. It's just like constantly evolving, and it's evolving in a meaningful way if we respect it by respecting our felt sense, by searching for exactly what needs to be done and said now that is the appropriate next step in carrying this situation forward. I believe that's, a wisdom activity. And not being stuck in this small self is important, because otherwise you can't respect your felt sense. You're just going to try to make some kind of shoe fit that you think you want to wear. And this idea of a true self, of pure awareness, is important in this process because it gives you the open space to be aware of this felt sense that is your interrelatedness. It's not another thing from the interrelatedness. It is the interrelatedness as we live it. And if you don't have a stable space of awareness, you might, to invoke the image of this writer again, who is like coming to this point where he or she is stuck, where you just go off and say the things that have already been said, where you're not searching for that next step that really needs to emerge and is new and is unknown and kind of dangerous actually for your life. Because like you might find yourself saying something that, other people dislike. But that's also authenticity, that you have the courage to do that thing that is the carrying forward of your felt sense, independent of whether other people will agree or not. And that needs a stability, and that is awareness. We need to cultivate awareness to be present to this stuff. Anyway, my belief is that what I'm trying to articulate as this felt sense and this process of carrying forward is not articulated in traditional Zen practice. It's implied. They knew about it, but they left it for everyone to just figure it out. Like, you'll get to it. Nanchuan, and I'm ending with this, finally. Nanchuan says, the way, the truth, the Tao, the process of living is neither in knowing nor not knowing. Knowing is false consciousness. Not knowing is indifference. Knowing are all the known facts, are all the concepts, all the structures, all the frameworks, all the ideas, all the values that already swirl around in our complex society. This is false consciousness. When you believe it, you're just going to repeat it. You're trying to find that philosophy that's going to be right for you, that life advice that you can just follow. That is knowing. This is false consciousness. This is not the way. Not knowing, he says, is indifference. You counter it with not knowing. So, why believe science? This isn't, stories. This is also the fallacy of the postmodern condition. Well, why believe the facts? We can do away with science. What are these ancient things? I don't care. I live now. If you're dismissive like this of no knowledge, you end up with indifference. But when Nanchuan denies knowing and not knowing, what space is he pointing to? A kind of dynamic knowing that is never fixed, that is always evolving from a living field of interrelatedness. And from that, which is a kind of not knowing, because the writer who doesn't know how to go on, it's a kind of not knowing, but it articulates itself as knowing. It articulates itself as that speech, as this action, as this new idea that really hits the spot to transform the situation. The way is not in knowing, is neither in knowing nor not knowing. So, that's what's being pointed toward. How do you find it in your body? Where is it? Thank you very much.